my friends. This is Christina Mand-Lakhiani, co-founder of Mindvalley, and welcome to my Honest Conversations. My guest today is Ursula Eysin. I almost pronounced it right, I think the emphasis was a little bit not so good. But Ursula, welcome to Mindvalley. Welcome to Honest Conversations.
Thank you very much for having me, Christina. It was absolutely perfect how you pronounced my name, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually can't be super proud about it because I know that when it comes to foreign languages in foreign words, I have nothing to match your skills, but I'll share it with people in a moment. So before we go into the conversation, Ursula is a founder of, a founder and the CEO of Red Swan, a Vienna-based consultancy focusing on the development of future scenarios. Fun fact, the one which I just alluded to is that Ursula, despite not being Chinese, not at all, speaks fluent Mandarin. My Mandarin, unfortunately, is very limited. Ni hao.
Ni hao, ni hao.
That's, well, I also know another word, but that's about it. So fun fact also, Ursula is a trained ballerina and used to work as a production manager, moderator, and presenter in theater, opera, and film before she became a passionate technology consultant and a communication professional. Ursula's broad knowledge and experience enable her to not only develop insightful future scenarios, but also create the right story, vision, and action steps around them. Besides that, she's a published columnist, a mentor to various Austrian and international startups, and gives lectures at 5 universities. This is truly incredible. Welcome. I'm very proud to have such a guest here. And our topic of conversation, not to butcher it, is the insanity of the race for self-perfection. So before we go into self-perfection, I want to ask about future scenarios. I kind of have a hunch what it could be, but could you tell in a few words, what is Red Swan, what is future scenarios? Because I think that gives a huge key to what we're going to be talking about today.
Yes, thank you for this very generous introduction. I really look good on paper, Christina. Yes, future scenario thinking. You mentioned I'm the founder and CEO of Red Swan, and our flagship is the development of future scenarios. And it's not to predict the future, because in my opinion, that would be a very powerless position. And it also would mean that the future is already determined. So what I empower companies, big organizations, and also individuals to do is to create the future and to deal with uncertainty in a better way. And let's be honest, all of us, we all hate uncertainty. I know that very well because I tried to sell this process since 2011. And it was not very much en vogue to go to companies and tell them, you have to deal with uncertainty in a better way. You have to change. Everybody wants change, but they do not want to change themselves. So now that we are, let's say, in one crisis after the other, my business became very popular. Starting in 2020, my phone didn't stop ringing. So many organizations who suddenly realized, oh, maybe we should think about the future. And to say that again, we are not developing linear future projections or anything like that. It's also not based on measurable data. It's more qualitative data. This process was invented by the US Air Force in the 1940s. What they wanted to know was, what could the enemy do? Of course, that's the question. In business, it's called, what could the competitor do? And this is, of course, a very uncertain. Human behavior in all our future scenarios is one of the biggest uncertainties we face in life. And that's also one of our existential uncertainties as human beings. Do other people like me or not? And that's a life or death question for us. It sounds so fluffy, but in ancient times, if the group didn't like us and we were ousted, we died. So it's actually really a life or death question. And we have to handle this uncertainty in a better way. So what did the US Air Force do? They did not develop linear projections into the future, which never can create innovation also, for example. they created different scenarios, and they said we should prepare for all of them. And in the 1960s and 70s, this methodology was then famously adapted by the oil company Royal Dutch Shell for business usage. With great success, Shell was able to skyrocket from a rather weak market position to top 2 of the world leading oil companies. They are doing that ever since over 50 years. And also now more and more companies, more and more organizations do that for strategic planning and to deal with uncertainty in a better way. And we are very happy to help that.
So you work with companies mostly. How is that idea of thinking about the future and trying to predict it, as futile as it sounds? How does that apply to single individuals? Because the way you explain it, it seems like it's more of a like a bigger question for bigger groups of people and for some very serious goals in mind.
We get this question, of course, a lot. And as I just mentioned, the US Air Force and Shell, of course, people say, is this only for big companies? Not at all. We do that for big companies. We also do it for governmental and international organizations, but also for individuals. And one example, I did that for a 13-year-old student who had a decision problem. And this is a process for decision problems. In Austria, at the age of 13, you can decide if you want to stay at the school where you are, or if you want to go to another school. And there are several options, and her whole family was desperate. Her mother told me, we really don't know. She is desperate, we are desperate, we don't know how to decide. She doesn't really like where she is, but she doesn't know how to decide. And I said, well, I have a process for that. It's a strategic process invented by the US Air Force for strategic planning and decision making. If she wants, we can try that. So we chose a Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and developed her future scenarios. For her future school scenarios. So we had done 4 different. First, we gathered driving forces. What is driving you? What would you like to see changed in the world? What would you like to change in the world? And what skills do you have, or what skills would you like to acquire to promote this change in the world? So these were her personal driving forces, and also externally, how could the world develop? How could the economy develop? And a lot of driving forces. And then we ranked them. How important is this driving force for you? And how much impact does it really have on your decision? And from this analysis, we took 2 main dimensions for her decision, and this usually forms a cross, 2 dimensions. And then you have 4 different scenarios. She had 4 different schools in this case. And in the end, I did an interview from the future with her. It was, in this case, she wants to become a human rights lawyer. And 10 years in the future, I interviewed her from the standpoint, now you are a law student, and did your decisions lead to this way? What kind of decisions did you take when you were 13? Were you happy with these decisions? How did that develop? And how did you get to the point where are you now, where you are now? And are you happy with that? Are you happy with your decision? So this was very, very interesting, and it worked so well. I really didn't know if, I mean, it's a strategic process, right? It comes from the military. I really didn't know if that would work with a 13-year-old, but it worked even better. It worked even better because 13-year-olds don't have all these boxes. It's really, they think so creatively and so freely. And at the end of the day, her mother came to pick her up, and she said, Hannah, that's her name, well, do you now know how to decide? And I said, well, I got the impression she pretty much knows what she wants to do. And the mother said, but Hannah, you told me you don't know. And then Hannah said, well, Mom, until today, I didn't know, but now I do. So this was really, really, really nice and rewarding. And we are already several years later. And as far as I know, she studies law now.
So do you still do that as a service to individuals, or that's just a one-off experience?
Yes, I also do that as a service to individuals.
We can talk about that a little later when at the very end of my interview, I usually ask if people want to get to know more of you.
Yes.
But now I want to ask, so with that, I'll ask two questions and I'll ask them at once and you'll choose where to start. So the question number one is that very often there is a theory that very often when we're trying to project ourselves into the future or we think about ourselves in the future, we don't take into account the changes that happen to us between now and that future self. And very often we are judging our, hypothetical position in the future from the point of view of us current. The question number two is, actually I forgot the question number two, so let's just stick to this question. How does that really work in a scenario, in your creating of future scenarios?
That's a very good question, because that's exactly why you need the process. It's not just, oh, come up with some future scenarios you would like to see or you would not like to see. It's really a step-by-step process. Of course, the US Air Force was very analytical about it, though it's not with measurable data. But there are, I like that so much because it's not just a free brainstorming. And this free brainstorming usually leads to what you just said. I cannot get out of the status quo. I just have my box and I'm in it and I project that all into the future. This is why we have these different steps. So the first step, actually, also if you do it as an individual, would be frame your challenge. What is your challenge? As I mentioned before, which school should I go to? It could also be, which job should I take? Which career should I follow? Should I marry this person? So it can be very, very individual question. So first, what is your question you want to decide on? And then gather driving forces. Which internal and external factors drive this decision? And this usually creates a lot. We usually do that with a lot of post-its, and it really creates a lot of driving forces. We usually help people a bit with saying, okay, what are sociological driving forces, psychological driving forces, economic driving forces, political driving forces, legal driving forces, so the whole range, technological driving forces. Think about all of that. So first you gather that, and then you take all this chaos and put it into an analysis. You ask the question, how important is that really for my decision? And how certain or uncertain is the development of this? And this is very nice, because then on the one side, you have certain trends. These are the things that are already fixed now. And we also think like 10 years in the future, it might also be fixed then. These things get less and less. Usually we thought that, for example, demography is a very linear thing, but with migration that also changes. Usually what is quite certain are things like our existential angst. As I mentioned, we have that. That's quite certain. That will be there in the future because it has been here for thousands of years. It's just in our psychology, it's even in our biology. So this will not change. But other things, how we handle that will change. So a lot of things will change. And this is what we call the critical uncertainties of the future. And then we take two of these critical uncertainties to form this different scenarios. Maybe also I illustrated by an example.
Yeah.
Another another example. I had a problem. I attracted a lot of bad business partners. It was a pattern. It happened again and again and again. And I wanted to get out of this pattern. Who wouldn't want to? So I did this process. First, I gathered driving forces. What do I want to see in a business partner? What are my internal driving forces? What are external driving forces? I analyzed them. And then for my two dimensions, I found out it's trust. Can I trust in them to take my best interests and also their own at heart? And the other would be thriving for excellence. And is it there or is it not there? And this cross forms 4 different types of business partners. The best one, of course, would be the empathic leader. And after that, I started to find these business partners. Then you have the supportive partners, which might not strive for excellence, but they can hugely support your business. And then you have the not so good ones, like the psychopathic leader, who is very goal-oriented and can, of course, ruin your business. And the covert narcissist was, for me, the fourth one, which also is not a very good business partner. I tried them all.
Any kind of partner for that matter.
Exactly. You can do the same thing for relationships, of course. It would be kind of the same. So I tried all of these good and bad business partners. And I, of course, wanted to avoid to reply the same pattern again and again. So the next thing we do in the scenarios is, what did I learn from these different scenarios? So the next is take aware and inspired action steps, because I think the first thing was what I described right now, is gaining awareness. And that's, of course, very important. And that, coming back to your questions, this is very good to gain awareness. It always leads to a change in perspective. It was very interesting for me. I had really hard time to allow myself to say one of these dimensions is thriving for excellence, for example, because I was sometimes I was accused of being too ambitious. So it was very hard to really realize, okay, this is really what I want. It's have to be honest about that. So it always leads to these changes in perspectives, and then you are living in reality. You see a lot, and you have 4 different scenarios, and you play them really to the worst end. This is why there are always also the bad scenarios in it. It's not just like, okay, let's imagine a wonderful future. That's not reality, right? And with these different scenarios, you find out a lot. And what I found out is I keep going to the same networks, to the same businesses. And I used to work a lot in politics, in public relations, media. This can attract a lot of narcissists and psychopaths.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I will meet these people again and again and again if I do not change that. So I actively changed that. I changed my behavior in this case. I started to find other networks. I even started to go to another country with my business. We're just beginning to do that. But I took inspired action steps, and that's very important. You cannot stop at the awareness. You really have to go to the action steps, and that's usually what we do.
The first example that you brought had more to do with indecision. The second one was a little bit maybe more complex in the sense that it was about patterns that you have noticed and you wanted to change. But I also noticed that a lot of people are struggling with indecision. And the question I want to ask is, in your experience, are we indecisive because we don't have enough information? Or is there some other force? Are we indecisive because we have enough information, but we can't commit to one or the other side? Or is there anything else? Why? I do not know how much you've worked with people in that kind of predicament, but what would your guess be? Why is it so hard sometimes to take decisions?
I have worked a lot with that because, of course, CEOs have the same problem, that they fall into indecision. And nowadays, it's usually more the problem that we have too much information, or not the right information, or not presented in a way that it can lead to decisions. What managers usually want to do then is to have some predictions with probabilities. And this is not really the way we can do it. This is actually what brought us here to the point where we have to do it in a different way. Of course, it can have different causes why you are indecisive. It can also be that you lack clarity. And this can be either you don't know enough or you have too much information. And with both, the process we are offering actually helps with both, because you see first, of course, you can gather a lot of driving forces, but then you narrow it down and really have to precise about what is really important. I mentioned this 2 dimensions, and so many people say, oh, we need more dimensions. I say, yes, every time we have this discussion, and we tried it with more dimensions. It's a very good exercise to really focus on 2 dimensions. The other factors, of course, come into the scenarios. We usually write scenario narratives then and act them out, and that people really play these scenarios also in different personas. This can lead to a lot of clarity and a reality check. And I think this indecisiveness, of course, can also come from fear. People usually say we fear the unknown, but that's actually not true, because if that would be true, babies would be afraid all the time because everything is new to them. But they are not. They're not afraid all the time. So usually it's what we project into the future. Is it more our fears or is it more our hopes? For example, we did a scenario process in Kenya. That was really fantastic because people project a lot of hopes into the future. So it was very positive. When we do these things in Europe with big organizations, very often it's more negative. It's more on the negative side because people project more of their fears into the future, and they think the future will be worse than the now. So they have a lot of fears. They are not fearing the unknown. They are fearing what they are projecting into it. And the process we offer helps with diving deep and finding out, what are these fears? What are these beliefs? And can we change the things? Once you find it out, you take a step into reality, and then you can change it. As long as you do not know it, you cannot change it.
Thank you. Actually, as you were talking, I remembered I was looking for some quotes on ignorance today, and I discovered this wonderful quote that you cannot be afraid of the things that you do not know. So it's actually the opposite of that's saying that you just mentioned. But then there are no absolutes. I'm sure that sometimes it's scary if you don't know, and sometimes you cannot be afraid if you don't know. How can you be afraid if you do not know what's happening? But that's just a side note. I wanted to switch now to the conversation about race to self-perfection. And having been in personal growth for 20 years, of course, I understand the idea of race to self-perfection in a very narrow way, which is characteristic to my industry. Considering that you're coming from a very different background, broadly very different background, what are you talking about when you talk about race for perfection? Sorry, can you paint a scenario of what's happening right now?
Yes, 2 things to that. First, it very much the whole thing connects a lot to what I'm doing with the future scenarios. So many people and also companies in the very beginning, let's say more in 2011, came to me and thought this would be a genius methodology to control the future. And this is also individuals think, if only I could control the future, then everything would be perfect. Then I would have a perfect life. But that's not possible. So this is very important to know. Life is messy. No matter how hard we try, we will never be able to perfect our lives. We will not be able to do that with any methodology. And second point, we will not be able to do that with technology. And this is my other flagship. I'm a technology consultant of over 20 years. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology. And very interesting, actually, for example, the whole artificial intelligence hype. I talk a lot to AI experts of decades who are far away from the AI media hype and favor science over fiction. And none of them would volunteer, for example, for brain chips like Neuralink does, Elon Musk's Neuralink, for example. They would not volunteer for such shenanigans because they know this doesn't work. And I think just now in the news, 1,500 animals got killed at Neuralink trying this genius technology. So what is this about? The idea is we have to implant wires into our brain to perfect the human material, and then our memory would be so much better. We would be so much better humans. And I try to keep technology human. And I think that's very, very important, and that gets lost a lot. Every day you get some advertisement for an app that increases your memory, your productivity, your body. And the message is very clear. We are not good enough the way we are. And they have some technology that will enhance us to become better. But is that really necessary? And can we really do that? I think that's a very mechanistic worldview. And it doesn't make us very human. We don't need optimized humans. We need more human people, people who are compassionate, who are creative, who create the new things and find solutions for big problems we have together in co-creation with other human beings. We do not need to become robots and cyborgs to do that.
You know, I was thinking about two things today. One of them I thought about today, and one while you were just talking. One question is, does that actually make us better, or does it make us more dependent? Because, for example, just recently I discovered that I don't remember any phone numbers. I barely remember my own, whereas when I was a child, I had a phone book in my head without an effort to do that. And another thought that crossed my mind today, nowadays there's this new fad, AI avatars. And, you know, I have studied art when I was a child. I mean, professionally studied art. So I've always said that there's a difference between crafts and art. Crafts are important, but crafts are a little bit, they're scalable in a way, and they're duplicable and replicable, whereas art, in essence, is genius. And I absolutely admire the AI that creates those beautiful pictures, but it also lacks the human, you know, quirk and weirdness, which makes us actually so much cooler than machines. But with that said, we can't really close our eyes to the fact that machines are going to take more and more of space in our life. Like we have robots in Estonia delivering, and I have a robot cleaning, and a robot this and a robot that. So how do we coexist with that influx of technology and not lose ourselves in it and not become too dependent on it?
I think with a set of values. This also comes back to my process. Usually when we develop technology scenarios, we developed future scenarios for the next generation internet, the internet for people 2040 for the Ministry of Technology in Austria. And one of the main dimensions in this case were values. Was very interesting to see. It was not one of the technologies. It was like, do we have core values to know how we handle this technology? And I think values can be a lot. I have a whole value card deck. It's, I think, 200 values. People have different values, but it's very good to dive deep to know what I call driving forces that can be very well values of yours. These are your priorities. And then you always know how to decide. I do that also for myself. I also use this guideline we developed to decide which technology to use and which technology I will not use, because it goes against my values. And I think very important to know for people is technology is not a God-given. It's something we decide to use or not. Also on the internet, with every click, we decide what will come up next. So choose wisely. I think the whole uncertainty thing is very good because it gives us the freedom of choice, the choice to give our lives a unique meaning. And of course, that's a lot of responsibility. And we also have to use these technologies in a responsible way. Of course, like social media, for example, tries to make us addicted. That's a fact. Many people know that there are a lot of mechanisms and we're still using it that way. But as soon as you realize what the mechanism is, you can step out of it and you can make a decision. So what we should not do, and that's a big discussion in the AI, don't give the power of decision making to the machine. This is our This is our responsibility. Don't give human agency to the machine, because of course then we are going down a slippery slope. We also had very bad scenarios in this case. If you go down, it can be like what's called the unconscious prisoner scenario. Everyone is imprisoned by technology and they don't even notice it because it was so convenient. Just install the next app and just install this tracking app and just install this. Let's just order food only via your phone. This is, for example, something I opt out. I never use a delivery service because I know what these platforms do to the local producers. And so I opt out of that. I don't use it. And that's your decision. You can do that.
So can you give other examples of which technologies you have decided not to use and why? And I do want to understand a little bit more about, maybe not more about delivery services, but how do you, if you sometimes are hungry at home and you don't have food, what do you do then? Do you
go outside and buy food? That's an option.
Yeah, of course, that's an option. That was an option when I was a child.
Yeah, but I think that's really important. I wrote a column that was called Assisting Ourselves to Death. And we cannot let machines live our lives for us. And also not, of course, I know all these providers work with convenience. It's so convenient. Oh, do that. And also the big tech companies like Google. I have several friends who work with Google. They say it's astonishing. These services are so individualized, and it's all about convenience. Take the next step. Come into our ecosystem. Only use our services. And if you're aware of that, you can opt out of that. So. Other things.
Can you go deeper into delivery apps? So what's the problem with that? Because for someone, maybe the value is to save time.
Yes, the problem with delivery apps is, as it's a typical platform business. Platform businesses always try to become a monopoly, and that happened very much with the delivery services. And I think there's one company who owns most of the delivery services. And in the beginning, it was, of course, also during the pandemic, they approached local producers, local restaurants, and said, well, come to our website. At least you still can deliver food. And of course, they did that because they didn't know how to survive. But then these platforms, and it's not only delivery services, also, for example, booking.com, they increase the rate they charge from the producers or the hosts when we speak about booking.com, and they ruin them. Because in the end, the producer gets less money than it costs them to produce the food. And that's really a big problem. If you want to ruin small coffee shops, small restaurants, yes, then use the delivery services. If you want them to keep alive, if you try to go outside and have a coffee, go directly to the restaurant. Ask them for their telephone number. Maybe they can deliver it to you. So these are really easy steps you can take.
So coming back to the idea of self-perfection, we were talking about technology making our life easier. But how do we plain say no to any technology which optimizes us as a human being, or is there also some kind of value system?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's good to decide using a value system. You asked me to name another example. I already said it. For example, tracking apps. As someone who lived in China and lived surveillance every day, everything, even my room was surveilled, and I had a shadow following me. All my every Skype call was surveilled. Everything, and it's not very funny, and you live in a situation where you cannot get out of it. So when they came with all these, install a tracking app, then you can go on vacation. For me, that was a clear no. Then I don't go on vacation. I will not install that, because once you have the technology, it's very hard to get out of it. So be aware of that. So for me, it's very clear, this technology I will not use. And of course, but you mentioned, of course, it can have useful applications. Most time it's in the medical field, of course, but as I mentioned before, especially for brain chips, there's a long way to go. At the moment, they killed 1,500 animals with trying to implant brain chips at Neuralink. This is not good yet. So I think no human would want to volunteer for that. So we still have a long way to go, but we should always be skeptical. And I think we are not only our human body, and our human body is not a machine. It's not like we just can plug in and connect us to a machine. I also think the whole Neuralink idea, I think the preposition for that is that the consciousness is in the brain, but we don't know that. Maybe the brain is just a transmitter, the consciousness is not in the brain, and especially our human body is not a machine. There's so many things we don't know about the body, so it's very hard. Would I reject everything? No, not at all. After all, I'm a technology consultant, and I'm working with, for example, the Austrian Institute of Technology on technologies who are really benefiting people. Like sometimes it's even low tech. Let's say good light. How makes it feel the human body. There's very somatic things, something that's good for the human body, but is not. And I also think the motivation is very important. Do not do it because you feel less and you should increase your memory, you should increase your productivity. Go into these patterns first, and then think what are your values, and what kind of technologies could help that. And it might be very different from AI.
I have another question. So about those this technology that enhances human body, and I know some of that is probably has become acceptable over time. Like, for example, we do have feelings in our teeth, yes, glasses and all these things which kind of enhance our body, or glasses probably enhance our body a little more. There are lenses as well, and a lot of things. But at some point, maybe that technology was also not compatible. I know that even now, certain implants are incompatible with some of the humans, not with everyone, and a body can reject even like vital organs and vital implants. So is it a problem of just technology being underdeveloped and not there yet, or is there a problem with for example, brain implants somewhere in the core or in the value system of even developing that technology? Where's the biggest concern right now?
Twofold. I think the one is really in the motivation. Why, for example, is AI hyped that way? As I said, I talk a lot to AI experts of decades, and they don't see the technology there. And also they say, what we want to develop is usually, we want to identify a specific problem, and then we want the AI to solve this specific problem. Like you have the vacuum cleaner robot, right? That's a simple problem, and the machine can solve that. They also say things. I
actually love my vacuum cleaner robot.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Isn't that perfect? Isn't that perfect? It was a problem, annoying problem, and this can be solved by this technology. This is very simple, and it works. And usually technologists say, we want to do that. You have a problem, you solve this problem. This whole discussion about AI and AI can replace human beings, robots will steal our jobs. It just didn't happen, and it doesn't happen. Since many, many years, we're just developing also a study on that. Where have the robots been during the crisis? We hear that robots will steal our jobs since more than 10 years. And now in this crisis, we actually would have needed them. Where were these robots who help people? So I think the question is, these people who push AI so much, despite the fact that the technology is just not there, what is the motivation? So I would question that. Follow the motivation. I think everyone can do research on that and find it out. So this is the one thing. And of course, also the thing is you cannot treat the human body like a machine. So yes, the implants is really a tough question. I think, yes, if you have, for example, lung transplants and these kind of stuff, of course, that can save lives. And I would never say reject it and don't try it. But also go back to the core values. First, try everything else. And in case you cannot solve it like that, yes, try it. And the other thing is, and that a lot of technologies also say that we are at the very beginning. It's really like the technology is in kindergarten. And that's, of course, also why a lot of that still doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't have personal experience. I have personal experience with people who had to have serious surgeries, which would not have been possible without the technology. Like my dad had a heart surgery, and my friend's child recently had. But I do not know. I'm just curious. Bionic limbs, are they as cool as people say?
This I don't know. I have also no personal experience, but I think prosthetics is also something I would say that's a good thing, because that really helps people. If you need it, if you lost your limb and you have prosthetics, isn't that wonderful? And the better it works and the better you can connect it to your nervous system, that's great. I think that's a great example for how to use it for the benefit of people.
So I'll ask a slightly unfair question, because considering that you take future seriously and you don't just gamble with the uncertainty, it might be a little unfair of me to ask that. But supposing some of those prosthetics might be more efficient than your actual limb for whatever reason. Do you think humanity is as crazy as to replace perfectly functional body parts with enhanced technological body parts? Well, for my own example, I know I was silly enough to fix my front teeth. They're not, I mean, they're real, but I fixed them beyond what I should have done. I mean, I would have preferred their little imperfections than what I've done. So I know we do that sometimes. For beauty, for example, a lot of people put implants for beauty, which is maybe an interesting motivation.
Yes, and that's my concern. And that's also why I wrote this column on the insanity of the never-ending race for self-perfection. Absolutely. Humans would do it. Sure. And the media hype, of course, influences that a lot. If you get messages like optimize your memory, increase your productivity, reach your dream weight, become the best version of yourself every day, it just says you are not enough, you are not enough, you have to change something. And this is my concern. And it's also why I want people to be cautious. Don't just jump on that, and go back to your motivations. Why do you want to have that? Why do you want to change that about yourself? Are you really not enough the way you are? Who said you were not enough the way you are? And were they even right about that? Probably not, because every human being has an intrinsic value. You cannot increase it and you can also not decrease it. So this intrinsic value is there. And that's also what I like to do in my processes, to bring people back to this intrinsic value and see it in themselves and in others, and to be more human.
I wanted to ask about, how do you help people to get back to seeing their intrinsic value?
It's actually the same process. As I said, it really leads you back to your core values. It leads you back to your core driving forces. And that's why I love it so much, because then you really see, oh, this is why I want to do that. This is how I define this. This is where I want to get. And when you become aware, you can decide. You might not change that, but it should be a conscious decision. And this is what I like to help people with.
Yeah, I was thinking just the same, that I've heard people make interesting choices, saying that they understand the reasoning and maybe the irrationality, but they will still do that.
And that's okay. That's okay. But at least take a conscious choice and first question, is that what influences me? These are these driving forces. It's not only internal. If you read in the media that you have to enhance yourself because the human material is so deficient that we cannot work with that. First of all, that's ridiculous. I think we don't even use 10% of our full human potential yet. So I think there's still a lot to do. And of course, you can use technology to help you, like mowing your lawn, for example. That's the other good example. And also prosthetics, etc. But why should you use that if you have a perfectly healthy limb? Then I would first really question yourself. What are my driving forces? Who told me that I need that? What was that? What did I read? Where comes this from? Why do you think I have to enhance myself that way? And if you still say, okay, I know it's because the media tells me I'm not enough and I believe them and I still decide like that. But usually I would recommend that people go directly for what they really want. And this is also why we dive deep into these driving forces. What is it that you really want? Is it this artificial limb, or is it, for example, to be loved? Very much, this is very often when people say, oh, I have to work out. Okay, of course, that's a good thing. Why do you want to work out? Oh, because I want to look better, because I want to have a relationship. Why don't you try to go for the relationship first? So go directly for what you really want.
You know, because I think it's a theory on my part, but I think it's sometimes so scary to go for the thing which is important to you. So it's in a way a good distraction, if and maybe I'm not using psychologically very appropriate terms, but in a way it's a good distraction to deal with things which you think are taking you there, but are much more understandable and clear and more tangible.
That's right. That's absolutely right. But unfortunately, that might lead us as humanity to demise. Distraction is, of course, a problem. And of course, we want to distract ourselves from things that hurt, right? But this is also this, we have to tolerate some discomfort sometimes to become better, to change it. And to have real stability, to have better lives.
You know, except painkillers, I don't think I've heard of any technology dealing with tolerating discomfort, and painkillers are probably not the best way to tolerate discomfort anyway. But I want to ask, still get back to that. We don't have enough time, and since Bianca is not bringing up anyone, I'll just ask my questions. I know there are questions, but you guys have to have courage to come and join me if you want to ask your question. So what I want to ask is that isn't that a balance, which is a little hard to strike? There is this whole philosophical debate about, for example, nuclear power being wonderful, but then it has also been used for destruction through stupidity, like nuclear explosions in the power plants, or through evil intent in nuclear weapons. The same with beauty industry. A lot of the beauty procedures were created to help people deal with very strong, maybe emotional issues, like breast implants. Apparently, they are used medically for women who lose their breast through surgery, for example. But there is always such a temptation to start using it wider and offer it to people who don't really need it. Do you have any prediction about, are we going to be any better with that balance, or and how do we solve that?
This is why I do what I do. I want people to become aware. I want them to realize the driving forces also behind technology, and then decide how we are going to use it. And the whole discussion, of course, that's very big in technology. It already started with the knives. I can use a knife to cut my bread, or can use it to stab my neighbor in the back. And this we cannot predict. This is a kind of uncertainty we also have to live with. I think, of course, that's possible. Should we, for that, stop technology? No, of course not. It's really important to innovate and also to keep our well-being, because we are a lot here, but together we can find solutions to everything. The human mind is very creative. We can think of things that are not in existence yet, and of course that also brings in technology. But we really have to think, is it for the benefit of people? That's really the core question. And I, of course, is like, bad people can use it in a bad way, but why are they bad? Are we intrinsically bad? I don't think anyone is intrinsically bad, in my opinion. When we are born, I think we have a lot of potential and we are not bad. So there are things that happen to these persons if they are bad and if they want to use technology in a bad way. And becoming aware of what they really want, and maybe really go straight forward for what they really want, also would help with that. So this is kind of my mission, why I do what I do.
So there is no escaping from your human essence, no matter how the technology is. We don't have a lot of time, but I want to ask this final question because it's tying to the previous question. We also live in this world which is so interconnected right now that sometimes it's the tide that carries you. You can choose that you don't want to use technology because you don't really need it, but then other people start using it and you start comparing yourself or competing with the people who are actually using it in the ways that you maybe initially didn't want to use. I'll bring a non-technology example with education. If before just having an education was, well, 100, 200 years ago, reading was a good accomplishment. Nowadays, you would not be even considered as a serious candidate for a serious job if your degree is less than master's. So how do you deal with that pressure of society making choices which you maybe wouldn't want to make, but you kind of pushed into that from the individual point of view? Do you have any suggestion?
Yes, that's also the same procedure, because we look at all these driving forces, right? And the pressures you mentioned are driving forces. This is, of course, what drives us. So the more we become aware of these patterns, the more we can see what we could do against it. And that's why distraction is so dangerous. If you just go with the tide, if you just think, okay, I use that now we come back to these core values, to these really core driving forces of yours. How do you decide if I want to use this technology or not? And of course, I realize, especially for the young generation, if you, as parents, if you say you cannot use Instagram because there's just so much child pornography on it, I just don't want to do that, or I even don't want you to use a smartphone, then of course it can lead to problems for your child, because the others, the group, is not amused if you are not part of the game. So I also try to inform young people about technology, about the mechanisms, about the addictive nature of the whole thing, and to make their decisions. And interestingly enough, we think the whole Generation Z, for example, oh, they only buy online. I just have a student who investigates on that, and he finds out it's not true. Also, Generation Z lives in reality. They have a real body, they meet real friends. So it's, as I said before, technology is not a God-given. A lot of technology is really pushed. A lot of technology tries to make you addicted, but you have a choice. And you can start to inform your friends. And you mentioned technology platforms. Young people change their platforms very quickly. Actually, there's something new, all my friends and me are gone. So you can develop new things. It actually can change very quickly.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, on this really interesting conversation has to end, and I can see a lot of questions. You guys really took time to start asking your questions, but it's a little late. Next time, please do it earlier. I do remind you in the very beginning of interview. I want to do the traditional thing. I'm going to ask the last question of my guest, and meanwhile, those who are online with us, I want you to ask Gerhard, for my wonderful guest, for her, for sharing her knowledge and her experience with us, and her really warm human approach to everything. And I want to ask Ursula, if people want to work with you, do you do sessions, like if they have big decisions, like you just described? Well, not just in the very beginning, you described you were doing a session with a 13-year-old girl. If not, how can they work with you? Where can they find you? And so on.
Thank you for the hearts and the comments. Thank you very much. I love it. Yes, you can find me on my website, www.redswan, like my company, redswan.at for Austria. And I write a monthly column on technology madness and the future of humanity on code red by redswan.substack.com. And you can connect with me via my website or also on Substack.
Okay. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Ursula, for joining me. And thank you, Bianca, for having our backs on the background. And of course, thank you, everybody who was live in this conversation. And by the way, I'm going to thank all the people in the future, because we were talking about the future, who are going to watch it edited and recorded and then uploaded into our platforms. So thank you guys as well. And I'll see you in the next interview, which will be in about a week. Bye.
Thank you, Christina. It was my pleasure. And thank you to the audience for all the hearts and all the questions. I would have loved to answer them. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.